relevant, reliable, and researched. This is Experts on Call, the show focused on delivering leading-edge news and information on today's most beneficial products and services. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Well, thanks to Dwayne, our producer, for that little bit of humor, that dry humor. Right? It's not about painting, but it is a painting. So it helps to provide us with a bit of a connection.
There you go.
I'm Tony Giaventu, and this is Talk About Strata Experts on Call on AM 650. And we have Dan Schmidt and Dave Humphreys from Remdale Painting with us in the studio. And we're talking about Strata corporations and the cycle of construction and all of the painting and everything that they go to. So Dan, we're just finishing off here. We're talking about, you've got the proposal and what the Strata Corporation should anticipate to get from a proposal from a painting company who's wanting to bid on the job for their building.
Yeah, so if you've had a good discussion with your contractor and now they're going to get back to you, first off, I would set a deadline for them. Most contractors are busy, and so give them a deadline. 2 weeks is a pretty good standard from the time you've met. Ask them for a response by then, and they should get back to you with something nice and clear in writing. It should recap what the scope of work is. So what's in and what's out again, right? It should have some exceptions that they're not going to be worked on, but it should really clearly lay out, these are the things that we're going to do. These are the buildings, these are the addresses, these are the areas. That just takes away all of the questions that come up from other strata members going, well, are they painting this section or what's part of it? Secondly, it should really include those preparation stages. Painting by its nature is covering up stuff, and when we're done painting, it looks nice, but if the preparation hasn't been done really well, then a paint job isn't going to last that 7 or 8 years or beyond. And so it should list how they're going to pre-treat areas. It should list how they're going to wash areas, what kind of attention to detail they're going to give to knot holes or to cracks or to caulking around windows or all those kind of things that you've talked about that a professional should look at. So the preparation stages.
It actually raises another question, though, because you should also identify what the method of application is going to be.
Definitely.
Because that is going to impact site preparation. So, it's really nice that we sprayed the building because it was an easy access and everything was taped, but our classic rhododendron and azalea bushes are also brown, which is now the color of the building.
And the car dealership next door.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Right? And everyone's cars parked in visitor parking and all of those issues.
You need to look at all those issues when you're looking at a building like that, and who are all the stakeholders? It's not only the owners, but it's the neighbors, it's the people walking by. Those are definitely things that need to be looked at and can be defined again in that scope of work Dan was referring to. Yeah.
So how they're going to apply it. Even down to what kind of products they're going to use, number of coats that they're going to use. I don't know if you get those kind of questions typically, Tony, about, so what's the best paint to use? We certainly hear, what brand do you want to use on a building? And so what we've done over at Remdale a number of years ago is we went to what we feel is the industry standard, which is, again, that Master Painter Institution we talked about. They publish, and you can go to their website, a full list of all top-rated, independently tested paint products. And so we decided we were only going to use those products on our sites. Where possible, we're going to go to that top brand, and we're going to go to something that's been tested to last, be resistant to algae and mildew, ultraviolet, all those kinds of things. But what product you're going to use, to that standard or not, should be listed. Otherwise, it's just 2 coats of paint.
Right.
Or I'm going to paint it.
Right.
And that's not good enough, frankly.
Are they predominantly oil-based paint, water-based paint? Are there different type of synthetic materials that are used?
Predominantly now we're using acrylic or water-based paints. Again, they've taken the VOCs, the government's legislated VOC reductions in products.
Right.
That affected the alkyd paints that we saw traditionally for the last 60 years.
Yeah, and for those that don't know what VOCs are, that's really just the whole solvents in the paints.
Right.
Volatile organic compounds.
Right.
And so by reducing that, steering the products towards acrylic base, there's excellent acrylic products out there now. I mean, the industry's come a long way. There are some acrylic products that are superior to their former alkyd counterparts. So very few issues with that, and as they continue to develop better products, again, these are all what we specify are tested products. They've gone through the Master Painter Institute and met their requirements, and then they are given a listing or a number depending on the category they fall under. We list that number when we do a quote, so anybody can refer back to it and make sure that it's actually an approved product.
And Tony, you mentioned, a good thought. How are they going to paint the place? Are they going to brush and roll it, or are they going to spray it? Another really important aspect that most stratas I don't think about right now is the whole safety side of things. When you hire a contractor, it's my understanding that you become responsible for their work on your site. You need to make sure they've got WorkSafe. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And you, as Strata Corporation, have a responsibility to be able to retain a WorkSafe account to cover the contractors who are on your site who may not be covered. So in the eventuality of an injury or worse, you, the Strata Corporation, will have liability. So, this is one of the relationships that is established. Does our painting contractor carry professional liability insurance? Are they current in their status with WorkSafe BC, and are they paid up to date? What is the provision of coverage with respects to this? Is there additional insurance required for this project because there may be additional liabilities associated with this project? And Strata corporations kind of treat, it's funny because Strata corporations kind of treat painting as a casual kind of project that's done sometimes until it goes badly, and it almost always goes badly. The project isn't complete. There are problems with it. There's damage to the building, and then the Strata, next thing you know, are in a dispute with a contractor that they didn't actually get a written contract with, and places them in a lot of jeopardy.
Yeah, and I think so in that written contract, most contractors should just be including their WorkSafe and their insurance documents for you. But even specific to site, there's probably some unique ways that you need to access the building. And so there should be a comment in there. Here's how we are going to plan to safely access this building, particularly if they maybe have some high areas or some unusual, maybe it leads into a ravine on one side of the building or something like that. What are you going to do back there in order to get there safely and do the work well? And secondly, in order to be have your workers safe and be compliant with WorkSafe as well.
Well, and when buildings are built, they're constructed for development and marketing, and not a lot of thought is given into what we're going to have to do to maintain this building in the next 40 or 50 years. And so, we have changes in building designs now. One of the changes is we now have 6-floor wood frame buildings. Well, that's changed the dynamics of how the safety conditions and the access to property and what is reachable, and what's reachable by ladder. Do we need lifts? Do we need scaffolding? How do you access all of these areas, these buildings for maintenance? And that's much more of a dynamic problem, and you're probably coming across that now.
Yeah, we're just beginning to, frankly, because most of those buildings are just being built now, and a new construction might only last, a paint job might only last 3 or 4 or 5 years, just because of the way that the nature of new construction work happens. But accessing in the safety side of it is much more of an issue.
Definitely. Much easier to access when it was being built. They can drive their boom lifts around anywhere they want, but once all the landscaping's in place, a lot of these 6-story buildings will be looking at scaffolding costs to continue their maintenance. So they also need to plan on possibly doing other maintenance at the same time, knowing that access is actually going to be their greatest cost.
Well, and even townhouse developments, this is one of the issues that came up through our offices in the last week, is that the townhouse development is having the buildings repainted. They're at year 12. They've never had them done. They're long overdue. They know it. But owners have planted things like shrubs and vines and things against the buildings that were never there originally, not realizing that there's some life cycles to them where they're going to have to be removed so the building can be maintained. And so there's a bunch of unhappy owners, but there's not much a Strata can do about it. It's their choice. So Dan, here's a question, or maybe better, Dave, better for you. How do you paint a high-rise?
Well, we take it down brick by brick. We paint it and put it back up. No, we have special access solutions that we use for these. Most of the time, it's a swing stage system when we're looking at a building that's in excess of 6 stories. That'll mean access is primarily from the roof. We place systems of beams and weights or clamps, and use safety tiebacks and anchors that are usually present on the buildings. And we go up and down the outside on these swing stages. We have a great team of employees that do this work every day, and they'll repaint something 300 feet in the air.
So how is paint applied? What's the method of application on high-rise?
On a high-rise, primarily it's brush and roll, so we can control that distribution of the product much easier.
Right.
It's a lot windier.
Yes.
above 60 feet. And we have to be very mindful of that as we access those areas as well. And so brush and roll is the usual culprit for doing that. There might be the odd area we'd target with a bit of spray, but not usually. Again, we need to control it's in a downtown environment usually, or a condensed area environment. And usually there's lots of glass around and cars and people. And we have to be very concerned, of course, when we're doing these as well. As I mentioned before, the stakeholders. So when we're doing a high-rise, oftentimes there's commercial development in the bottom. There's neighbors, there's pedestrians, there's vehicles. We have to be mindful of all those aspects as we approach these buildings. What sort of overhead protection do we need to afford for that ground level work to continue, for someone's business to remain open and unaffected by our work? So lots of things to consider.
So have you ever had, this is the question everyone wants to ask, have you ever had somebody drop a gallon of paint from a high level?
I've never experienced a gallon of paint going down. We have quite a restoration division where we do concrete repairs. That involves demolition of concrete work.
Right.
We've never had a major incident where anything has fallen. We wrap the stages with scaff net. We go to the nth degree to ensure that the materials that we're working with stay with the guys that are working, and the tools are tethered. So if they have a chipper or any
Right.
piece of equipment, it's tethered. If they drop it for some reason, it isn't going anywhere.
But it is a worry, and one of the safety considerations anytime we're working overhead. What kind of hoarding or what kind of when you walk downtown and you walk under some of these scaffolding with plywood on the top, we place that kind of hoarding over certain areas in order to protect against the questionable. It could happen, and we would hate for anyone ever to get
Injury,
Yeah.
risk, damage, property damage, property damage to adjacent properties.
That's right.
Are there special considerations on high rises? Things like permits, safety considerations that are not normal on a mid-rise building, for example?
Yeah, well, anything from, like I say, anything we're accessing with a swing stage up to about 300 feet. That's the cutoff for us, where it's access down to ground or landing grade. If we exceed that, we actually need to go for a special permit to exceed that, and there's some new regulations that kick in. We have animators on each swing stage so they can measure wind speed.
Right.
They have a special descent plan should they run into trouble or should a wind kick up and they need to get out of there quickly. A few other things that we go through because we're a little further away from the ground, and it just takes time. It takes about 20-25 minutes to crawl up the outside of a building at 300 feet.
Kind of gives painting the house a whole new definition,
It
doesn't
does.
Dan, any final words or recommendations you'd have for a Strata Corporation as they're going through their paint cycle?
Yeah, I would recommend that a Strata, if they're considering going into a paint cycle, they write down some of the things they want to do, so that when they meet with the contractor, they can review a list of things together with them, and that list is consistent with whoever they meet with. And then secondly, that they do their research. I think that all too often, we provide some references of buildings we want to give them to similar, or maybe in their neighborhood, those kind of things, and we don't find out that they've actually called those references. If you're hiring someone, you always call their references. It's bad on you if you don't.
Exactly.
Well, now you're hiring someone in a very large dollar value normally to paint the exterior buildings. Call the references. Drive by the sites that have been painted a couple of years ago. See how they still look. Check into some of the other resources that you have out there. There's obviously talk to the folks at CHOA. Check out who's a member of the organization. Better Business Bureaus. There's some other consultants that you may want to check with too.
Yep, certainly.
Thank you very much for joining us. We have on the CHOA website at choa.bc.ca, the Condominium Homeowners Association of BC. We have a owner's project checklist that Dan has helped us to prepare from Remdale Painting that just basically helps the Strata Corporation understand all of the issues that you're going to be going through. It's a great checklist, and it's a little guide that helps you in your decision-making process as you go through it. And to get more information from Remdale, go to remdale.com, remdal.com, and their number is 604-882-5155. I'm Tony Giuventu. This is Talk About Strata, Experts on Call, AM 650, and we'll be right back.
Delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call, and there's more still ahead on AM 650.